So we've titled this Navigating the Complex Pathway of Youth Sport Training Load. I think whenever I've had discussions around youth athletes, especially in schools, this sort of is always a quite central topic in relation to that. And I guess as the figure shows, that the athlete normally in the middle, and there's normally lots of people trying to pull in different directions. So I'm going to, I guess, just present a little bit of information, and hopefully it'll create a bit more of a discussion. And actually, when I was pulling this together, because this is probably based more on work of a colleague of ours, really, who wasn't able to present today, but when I was pulling the presentation together, I actually realised that some of my philosophies and ideas have changed in this space. So I've maybe come full circle, maybe over the last 10 years in relation to this. So let's see where it goes. I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts as well. So I think this has been mentioned a couple of times today. But if you think of youth sport, okay, there is normally, we can associate a number of consequences with that. And Sergio asked that question around is sport good, really? Well, if you look at this from a consequence perspective, that youth sport can create a number of positive consequences. Back to sort of Kev's idea from a biopsychosocial perspective, there's a number of physical consequences, which could be improved fitness, improved skill, etc. Psychosocial impacts around improved self-esteem, improved confidence, life skill development, and there's evidence to show that youth sport can have benefits from an educational perspective as well, in terms of higher academic achievement, etc. So there's a range of positives, but associated with that, there's also a range of negative consequences that's associated with youth sport. Okay, and we can look at them on the same thing. So although it may improve fitness, there's also then risk of overtraining, injury, illness, other long-term health consequences, potential burnout, athletic identity, and then things around educational sacrifice. So really, it is a bit of a seesaw, it is a bit of a balancing act, and really, I think there is a number of factors that can come into it, but in the context of this presentation, that sort of fulcrum there is fully related to training. And we can call it load, we can call it practices, we can call it schedules. There's lots of stuff in the literature around how we refer to training, but they all slightly differ. But it's ultimately what do young people do from a training and competition perspective. Now, as I said, in terms of getting that balance and trying to maximise the positives and minimise the negatives, it is a bit of a balancing act. Okay? And it is a fine line between what is the optimum amount of time someone should train to improve physiologically without the risk of injury, etc. So it is a balancing act in terms of what we do. Back to some of the stuff I referred to earlier, Rodney Lloyd colleagues, etc. put this statement in one of their NSCA-related papers around the welfare and well-being of youth, long-term athletic development pathways must be administered and monitored carefully by practitioners responsible for the overall development of the child and adolescent. Okay, so quite a broad statement, and I'm going to come back to this later. But if we're a practitioner, we've got working with a young person, we've got responsibility. Have we got overall responsibility? That's probably part of the question that I'll ask later. And really, I think again, it depends on the context in which we're working with which people are working with it. So we know that if we look at one example or one context of a Premier League, say, football academy, where youth train, we've got an under-16s level, okay? We know that these young people are going to do these things. They're going to play matches, they're going to train, they're going to do some S&C, they'll probably do some PE, they'll have some psychosocial development and curriculum as part of that, and then they'll do their education and academics, okay? But probably what makes it easy, or easier within that context, is that everyone that's working, or most people that are working with those young people, are all within the same organisation. Okay, so we hope that they'll be working collaboratively, multidisciplinary team with technical coaches, S&C, sports science, welfare manager, etc. dependent upon the school they may go to, there may be a PE teacher and some teachers, but even within some academies, that may all be controlled in-house. Okay? So if we think of like managing training load, training practice schedules, reducing those negative consequences, even though that's difficult in that Premier League football academy, it's still difficult, but should be a lot more manageable. Okay? If we then compare that to a student athlete, probably within most schools, most independent schools or state schools, and then we think around what they do. So they play for school, train for school, play for club, maybe multiple clubs, train for multiple clubs. They then may have additional representative training games on top of that. They'll do PE, they'll do gym probably in their own time, they'll do some S&C at school, they may play some other sports, etc. So we know they do a lot of stuff really, ultimately. Okay? That then makes this idea around, within those, because those environments are all different, there's so many people that are contributing to the athlete's development and what they do on a weekly basis. Okay? And then, this is not to say that those in that Premier League environment don't, but then there's a range of other factors to throw in as well, in terms of their school, their friends, their family, the homework. Some of them may have a job, and the other hobbies that they do. And it sort of throws up this real social, complex social world that really puts this young student athlete in the middle of, in terms of the complexity of all the interactions that they're having to be able to manage that. And I think that's really difficult. Okay, and I think that's the sort of the problem that we're trying to overcome there. So this is Sean Scantleby. This who should have been doing this presentation today, but he couldn't make it. Sean wrote this piece, I think it was about 2020 on the back of his PhD in strength and conditioning journal around navigating the complex pathway of youth athletic development, challenges and solutions to managing the training load of youth team sports. So this was Sean's sort of discussion of his PhD that he did at Queen Ethelburgers in terms of the work that he'd done there and how he tried to pull that together. If you haven't read the paper, it may be a worthwhile. I'm going to go through it quickly and then reflect on that paper a little bit. So the paper revolved around sort of this figure where we presented 4 challenges and then 4 solutions in relation to managing that youth athlete and that that complex system. So the first one we termed was this idea of scheduling tug of war, which I guess aligns to the first slide that I used and the slide that I've just shown in terms of all the arrows. So does training align between stakeholders? Okay, so if we think of an example, this is a young rugby player who plays for their school team. So we've got the days of the week here on the bottom. The duration of activity is split down by competition, gym, and technical training. So within the school environment, there's 4 occasions there: 2 gym sessions, 1 match, 3 training sessions. We say that looks probably appropriate. Maybe the schedule is slightly off what would be optimal, but looks appropriate in terms of volume and load. This player also plays for an academy. They train on a Tuesday and a Thursday and play a game on Saturday. And then they also play another sport where they train on a Thursday and play on a Sunday and train on a Thursday. So when we put all that together, okay, for this athlete, and this is a real example, just within 1 week, all right, there's obviously this idea of this tug of war and lack of alignment between the 3 environments, because they're doing something every day of the week. They've got three competitions, 4 gym sessions, 4 training sessions, some lasting nearly 2.5 hours, and it really, that's just one example of a week in terms of that lack of alignment, and I'm sure you all see that in your environments all the time. So what we, presented as a solution was this idea around increasing communication between stakeholders, the athlete being centred to that, and that training is an important element and sometimes even more important than match play. So I reflect back on the solutions we provide, and the solutions are a bit superficial a little bit, in a way. to increase the communication between stakeholders. Like, yeah, we know that, but how do we do that? The second challenge was this one around organised chaos, and that youth sport is a chaotic, it's organised for youth sport, but it's chaotic in nature, and therefore have individual monitoring strategy in place to do this. So I guess just some data, this was based again rugby from a Paddy Fims that did his work here, that one player within an academy squad, they did some GPS monitoring, they do run 6 kilometres per week, but another player would run 26 kilometres per week, coefficient variation of 75%, over 4 times as much running between different players within that, suggesting that we can have this scheduling, but it needs to be done on an individual basis, because everyone, all players or all youths do different things in terms of the load that they do. And again, in relation to the solution, we need to implement some monitoring techniques to monitor players on an individual basis. That needs to monitor the load or the practices that they're doing. In this example, we probably use session RPE as a most appropriate load strategy, that you don't need GPS and it can be quite easy to collect. And then we should then maybe monitor some of the response through a daily wellbeing questionnaire or the perceived recovery scale. So some easy, hopefully easy to implement monitoring techniques to manage some of those things. Challenge 3 was this idea between coach and athlete mismatch. So are coaches and athlete perception of load the same? This again is something that Sean did in terms of looking at basically in terms of training intensity. Does an athlete think what the coach thinks? Okay, depicted by this image here, that one's saying 4, one's saying 3. And when Sean collected this data, so a coach basically said this is supposed to be an easy session, a moderate session, or a hard session, and then they got the coach, he attended RPE, and then compared that to what the athlete perceived the session afterwards. So what we can see here is that when coaches think that they're planning an easy session with an RPE of 2, athletes are rating that as an RPE of 4. So that the athlete perceives the easy sessions a lot harder than the coaches do. But when it's the harder session, there is a reduction, but maybe not as much. So again, it's not just being able to plan the sessions appropriately, but it's how do athletes perceive that, and then knowing that all athletes are different in terms of training history, etc., makes that really difficult because of the dependent upon the sport and context you're working with. So really, again, solution, manipulation of the training program to achieve the desired response. I'm not actually quite sure what we're really getting at there, but ultimately that we need to have that alignment between the intensity of the session. And then the fourth one is this idea around the student athlete. Is there a balance between sport and education? Theon will talk about this in the last presentation as well. But we know that in data suggests that when academics, exams are at their most intense, and sport can also be intense at that period, that leads to increased stress of individuals, and obviously we want to manage that, because actually that stress can result in injury, illness, etc., and potentially poor academic and sporting performance. So it's a real, again, balancing act when we factor in the education, and really the solution was how do we adapt the training program to allow the student athlete to manage those competing demands, and really should sport training be reduced in terms of key academic times to allow that to happen. Okay, so that is a quick summary of the paper that Sean wrote on that, and in terms of those challenges and solutions to it. And then, as I said before, when I was preparing this presentation, it really allowed me to think about that and have some key reflections in terms of how we doing that appropriately. Because I've tried to implement this, I'd say, not in a school, but in a rugby academy where they train twice a week, players are part-time, they're doing various things, and for the last 10 years, and I don't think I've done it very well, and I don't think I've ever got it right. And I think it comes down to this and this, in that there's so many people to try and factor into those decisions and the monitoring. And then when we throw in factors around the individualisation of the athlete in terms of their growth and maturation, and that's different. We factor in their training age and training history. We factor in previous injury history. I just question how realistic is it for within the constraints that we've got and the resources that we've got to be able to manage this and to be able to implement this training, monitoring and training management through a staff member that's probably got lots of other responsibilities as well. I was sat back and questioned, how realistic is it actually to do this? And that's my honest opinion. So, and then I guess the other factor was this, back to this statement here, it's around these pathways should be administered and monitored carefully by practitioners responsible for the overall development of the child or athlete. Okay? In this scenario, who is responsible? I don't know actually who is responsible. Well, I think after thinking on this, I know who should be the most responsible, but I'm not sure if I'm right. So who do others think is responsible in this example?
Depends on in that example there, it depends on your scenario. So I can relate from my experience where I'm at currently, is that a lot of it is driven by what we would have as a boarding house parent. So that they are the sole parents of what the girls do in school. If they're slightly injured, they're off games, they can't do anything. Yeah. Whereas we know that they can do other stuff in and around SEC, in and around skill-specific sports, that kind of stuff. Whereas if they're off games, they're off games, you can't touch them.
I never even thought about the boarding situation as well. So that's another factor. That's another factor to throw in. Thank you. So potentially boarding. Yes. Nick, is it?
Yeah. I think, as you say, everybody's so busy in our environments. We again try to implement various things and sometimes get it right, sometimes get it wrong. But ultimately, I think bizarrely, the kids at the centre, they're the only one that's fully immersed in their own life. So we have to give them the tools and the understanding and to empower them to be able to flag when they're doing too much to them, give them that knowledge to try and, yes, we'll have systems that might come up with stuff and clever ways of doing it, and we grab it and we go doing time and so on and so forth. But I think we need to make sure we create an environment where they feel safe to say, so would you mind speaking to my external club because I'm shattered or vice versa kind of thing. So that's what I'm now reading.
Thank you, Nick. Good. Anyone else?
I was just going to echo what was said there. Probably is in line with what I'm thinking, but I think by proxy, if you've got a child, say that, if they've got to get consent to think of something, the parent is the overall marching, gateway to all of these things for them, because without that, they can't access any of these sporting opportunities anyway, or anything else going on.
So, I mean, based on those last two answers, probably where I got to yesterday or the day before when I was preparing this presentation, and when we say who is responsible or who is responsible for the overall development, I feel it is the student athlete and the parent. That's probably where I got to, which, prior to this, I wouldn't have said, those reflections, I wouldn't have said that, but then there's other maybe factors to consider around, they may not, back to QE's example, there's quite a lot of overseas students that go there, so it may be down to the boarding house who then have got loads of responsibilities to do, so it may need to rely more on the athlete. So I think that is who is responsible is something to really think around this in terms of then how we implement some of these things. I presented this slide earlier at the beginning of the day in terms of the challenges, and I think although high training volumes is one of the challenges, I do think that each of the challenges on the board actually contribute to this issue. I think the governance of sport is at the minute, and the priority is that some coaches may place on people that they take a winning focus over a development focus results in it. We've got not enough resources to manage this effectively, like the football academy does, when they probably still can't get Right. Is there enough education, skills and knowledge of the athlete, of the parents, of people working within this? Motivation of the athlete to be able to manage their own things. Communication we've already discussed. Sport specialisation is probably part of the issue, and then again parents. So it's some of these things we cannot control. We can try and make change slowly over time, but I don't think as practitioners like working on a day-to-day basis we can control some of these things. So we need to be aware of those issues, and we can only do what we can do with the resources that with what we've got available. And that then, when I was thinking further, that this really, as a practitioner of Galsby role, it comes down to practitioner decision making. And these are some of the questions that I came up with, like example questions where, should he, she play or train today? It's like a simple yes or no, or they may adapt the session. How long should he, she train or play for? How hard should he or she train? What are his areas to develop? Can they do an alternative? Which actually are quite simple questions when we break it down. But to be able to answer that question, I feel that there needs to be, it's important there's a set of key principles there that allow us to answer some of those questions to be able to make a decision. And although I contributed to this paper, which was on early sport specialisation, we provided some, solutions in that paper, which I actually think, for me, when I come back to this, are some of the key principles. And again, there's not many, and there's probably different ways of looking at it. But for me, a key principle is that we should be looking to establish a long-term learning and development environment based upon clear values through caring relationships and communication. I think some of those come through on the LTAD slide. And therefore, if we have that as a clear philosophy that's within there, go back to one of those questions, should he, she play or train today? Well, if they've played yesterday and trained the day before and they've got academy training tomorrow, and they're in this, and our philosophy is around development environment, the answer's quite simple. Okay, but until we've got clear principles that everyone in the environment agrees upon, I think that's where conflict occurs. Programs have got to be individual and they've got to be holistic, and that support program, really, alongside the sporting things, technical, tactical, has got to include strength and conditioning work, and that's got to be done regularly and at the right, because it's a protector as well as a performance developer. It's got to include psychosocial development. Okay, we should be encouraging sampling of sports and sampling of skills within environments, for me, up to 16 years of age. Even from once a week. And then back to this idea, it's got to be educational. How do we educate athletes and parents in relation to that? And then where we can monitor reflectively, we should be using those as well. So I don't think there's any surprises there, but again, I think it's quite important to state that. And then it's how do we create that support or establish that support network. Probably mainly through CAP families should maybe come first, and then through coaches to allow that to, for those principles to play out and to manage this. So they're quite big scale key principles. If I then go into principles of what that means from a training load, practices, schedules perspective, these are what I came up with. So we've got to know the student athlete's goals. If their goals is back to just sport participation and having fun, where do they have the most fun? If it's around development, where is the highest quality training environment to allow them to develop so they maximise the session and we plan around that? We need to support individuals in planning a balanced training week. A balanced training week should include a variety of hard, moderate, easy sessions and a rest day or days. Ideally, no more than 2 matches a week and not every week. Minimum of 2 S&C sessions, in my opinion, and participation at least one of the sport. That may come through PE. Ideally, we aim to maintain a stable week-to-week load, and again, based on fixtures, so there's not these fluctuations in load and some of the acute chronic stuff, even though we can critique Gabbett, you know, ideally want it to be stable. How can we monitor that activity and the well-being through athletes and athlete and parent-led? And then how do we use sleep and nutrition to support that recovery? So they're the key training principles. And then, although I didn't put it in the presentation, I thought this earlier after Kev's presentation earlier around biopsychosocial development. Ultimately, training load is a biopsychosocial process. Oh, I'm sorry. So here's what I got from more of a although I could definitely present this better, because I only put these in before the presentation, but knowing the goals is around the athlete motivation. Planning an effective week is about the athlete being self-organised. Monitoring the activity is that the athlete and the parents have got self-awareness of what they're doing, and then the sleep and nutrition is lifestyle and general health and well-being in relation to that as well. So we can really, I guess, develop a range of psychosocial skills that are needed from an education perspective, really important for student athletes and parents to know, and I think we can tie this in. So that's where I got to in terms of preparing this presentation and I guess reflections on this, and I've definitely gone to more, I don't know if I'm taking the easy solution, but going to more generic principles rather than sort of let's try and collect loads of data to inform and then work individually athletes to do that, because I just don't think we've got the time and the resource available to work like that. So yeah, happy to discussions, thoughts from others, feedback, your key takeaways, things that stood out to you, or any questions that I'm happy to try and answer, but I've definitely not got all the answers, and that's just my take on it. So thank you. I know this is part of the area as well, so
it's a wicked problem, but I think when you ask the question of who is responsible, and you had the image of the student athlete in the middle and all the people around them, by definition, like a pupil or a student athlete will spend probably more, maybe half their living hours whilst they're at school, give or take some percentage, and school is probably best placed to be the one that actually manipulates the training program or makes those decisions based upon those principles. And I think rarely are they aware that is their responsibility, and it's a tricky one to try to convince people of. That unfortunately, sports-based coaches within the school, when faced with the dilemma of do I train this player today or do I play this player this week, if they've got an important cup run or a cup game, they're less likely. Well, they're often in a very difficult position. You say you've got to drop the player because the club won't do it or the academy won't do it. It presents another problem. But I think school probably has to be responsible for, because they're probably the only people with oversight of all the things the kid does, and they're the only ones that actually have significant enough control to be able to make changes that will filter down to us over time.
Is there enough resources in the school, in terms of staff time, to be able to do that?
No way.
But I would say that's where the change needs to potentially be made in terms of going back.
Well, I think you also put the point is really valid. It has to be broad brush principles. We did a rugby tour to Biarritz, and randomly halfway through, we had 2 games. We're only there for 4 days, and our second fixture got cancelled because the French Rugby Federation has a rule where kids under 18 aren't allowed to play 2 rugby matches within 48 hours, and they enforced that on us.
Yeah.
But something like that would stop a whole load of it. I mean, if you did that for cricket, I mean, you kill cricket in the UK, but it would have major implications. But whether that will come down from the top as well, there has to be some top-down governance as well, I think.
Yeah. But that takes time. That's going to take time, and that's what probably the challenge is. It is some of these things it's going to take a long time to change. So how do we, work effectively? So, all right, thank you. And good. Anyone else? Go on, Sienna, and then we'll go there.
I was just thinking maybe reflect on, I coached S&C, just on academy tennis players, who are aged from 11 to 15, 16. well as having maybe 3 days of a tennis match or tennis tournament, their load like fluctuates quite heavily, but they feel that they can't say no to any one of those things, especially as they're getting an income, some of them from their tennis as well at that age. So it's like adds a whole other problem in. And in addition to that, I think they don't get enough CBD support on what a typical week kind of should look like, which would be like an interesting way, I think, where academies and schools can support these student athletes is, again, as someone said earlier, putting the onus on themselves to have access to that education and then bring that forward to maybe their teacher or their parent, as well as giving them that education as well. And then fitting that into weekly schedule and everything else is a whole other problem as well.
Thank you. I think it's again, back to who's responsible, like we're putting that on the athlete. It's there's a part of like what power dynamics at place, and having an athlete, a young person, being able to go to a coach and say, well, I'm not playing today because I did this just like, yeah, and that's another challenge.
I think on the player side, it's not the player that then goes to coach. The player has to have the awareness of what's happening in their world, because we've had someone in our boarding school environment as well who was head of student athletes, tried to almost tie with the university model. And even though we had someone who that was like the bulk of the job, he still couldn't get around everyone because, you know, he was meeting late at night with the HUSM, the tutor, bringing an external club, you know, she's part of a group golf England. It was incredibly volume time it absorbs. So it's almost like that person needs to be aware of their terms, so sit down and start you and say, where's your pinch points? And then for them to flag it with that trusted person who can then communicate and be the power dynamic as such, as opposed to, as a kid, or even when I was grown up, to say I'm not playing.
Well, so even for the parent, you know, yeah. Last point, and then we'll move
How
on.
did you navigate the conversations with being an academy setting into the schools with the players that were taking part in either the same sport you were playing in the academy or when you were doing different sports in the school? Because that's one of the issues we've got in our setting is kids will go into an academy setting and there's almost like just this unwritten expectation from the academies that they then have to follow their training program, go to their training schedules, and so on and so forth.
How did I do it?
Was that instigated by like the person in my role as an SSC in a school, or was that instigated by you, that conversation?
Yeah. So I guess in my role now, so I is in rugby league, and it's probably quite different to the rugby union, where there's the school and club games not as bad. So, but again, like I'll be honest, I don't really do that, so I haven't got like time to do it. Previously, I think there's been some relationships with the academies where they'll go out to schools and visit because of the rugby union academy season being a little bit, I guess, trying to be organised in terms of periods of high demand and the club doing it. But again, I haven't got staff to get around all the schools. I'll probably just work with the schools that have got the biggest representation, or the players that are on the EAP players, I don't know if it's called EAP, or EAP players that have got that. So, but again, my understanding and experience is that there's still a lot of them. It doesn't work that well because people have got different commitments. So, So I think there's a lot of work in this area. Hopefully there's some ideas to take away there.